Manx Radio's update with Lewis Foster.
First of all, and welcome along to Update on Manx Radio. It's 5 o'clock on Friday the 28th of February. Let's get the weekend underway with a half-hour look at the latest news on and from the Isle of Man. Coming up, we hear what Tesco has to say after some Manx businesses raise concerns about working with the supermarket giant. The latest stage of the work to restore Queen's Pier in Ramsey is facing some challenges. And would a new approach help combat antisocial behaviour in Onchan? All that and more, plus business, weather and sport, and what to watch out for on the roads. Get in touch, text 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com. First of all, Siobhan Fletcher is here to take us through today's headlines. Faster my.
Tesco says it's proud of the work being done to stock Manx produce on its shelves. The supermarket chain has now reopened all of the stores it took over from ShopRite following the deal in 2023. However, some businesses have been expressing concerns about working with the retailer. From today, Andreas Meats will no longer supply its products. The world of Manx sport was celebrated last night in Douglas with the 2024 Isle of Man Sports Awards. 14 honours were handed out in total, with Sir Mark Cavendish and Yasmin Ingham winning the coveted Isle of Man Sportsman and Sportswoman of the Year titles. Volunteers progressing the restoration of Queen's Pier in Ramsey say they are here for the long term and won't be deterred by bad weather. Severe storms recently and an unpredictable summer last year means progress has slowed on the project. But project manager Dennis Curfey says the further out to sea they go, the more difficult it becomes.
We're already having to think of other ideas as to how to put the steel on and take it off, because we can't always be on the beach. The tide doesn't go out far enough once we get out to Bay 18-19.
We are being reminded to look to the skies tonight in the hope of spotting a planetary alignment. 4 planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars and Jupiter, and the new moon should line up and be visible to the naked eye. Astronomer Howard Parkin from Astro Manx says it'll be best to try and spot them just after sunset.
And Mercury is very quick, it goes around the sun very quickly, so it will disappear very quickly. So we'll probably by about Monday it'll be gone, but the other 3 will remain there.
And sunsets in just about 50 minutes' time. And a Castle Rushen High School student has become the first to address the UK Youth Parliament in the House of Commons. 16-year-old Daisy Arnold spoke during a special debate for Crown dependencies and overseas territories. Further afield, Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived at the White House for a potentially vital meeting with Donald Trump. Labour MP Annalise Dodds has resigned as International Development Minister in protest over cuts to overseas aid in order to boost defence spending. And police in Greece have clashed with demonstrators calling for justice 2 years after the county's worst rail crash. Manx Radio News at 3 minutes past 5. I'll have your next update at 6.
Thank you, Siobhan Gurumaya. The weather brought to you now by Manx Glass and Glazing. Continuing dry this evening and tonight with clear spells and mostly moderate south or southwest winds. Minimum temperature tonight about 4 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow will then start dry and bright, but thicker cloud may then bring a little patchy light rain and drizzle late morning or early afternoon, but this won't amount to very much, Ronald Dway says. The mainly moderate southwest winds will fall light during the afternoon, the maximum temperature 9 degrees. Then dry with sunny intervals on Sunday with moderate or fresh southwest winds, maximum temperature 10 degrees. Sunrise tomorrow morning at 8 minutes past 7 and sunset tonight at 7 minutes before 6.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
Cannell's Agricultural Supplies have been serving the good folk of the North for over 30 years, supplying homegrown wheats, whole and rolled oats, working clothing, fencing, animal feeds, parts, tools and emergency supplies. Call Julia on 880206 or find Cannell's on Facebook.
Patricia Wild Opticians is celebrating over 30 years of friendly, caring service in Farm Hill and Ramsey. Visit us for professional eye care with stress-free parking. Phone Patricia Wild Opticians on 813 977.
For over 25 years, Lineness Maintenance Services have been the block paving specialists, including property maintenance, fencing and landscaping. Fast, reliable and competitive. For a free no-obligation quote, call Paddy on 49667. Lineness Maintenance Services, 49667.
A ground source heat pump can save thousands of pounds a year, and you can harness this energy on island with Geothermal Limited, the water borehole experts. Visit drilling.im and see how a ground source heat pump borehole works. That's drilling.im.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
That's right, and the time now 5:05. As we heard from Siobhan there, Tesco says it's proud of the work being done to stock Manx produce on its shelves. It's after the supermarket giant has now reopened all of the stores it took over from ShopRite following the deal in 2023. However, some businesses here have been expressing concerns about working with the retailer. From today, Andreas Meats will no longer supply its products. Richard Freer is the area manager for Tesco on the Isle of Man and says they've worked hard to help facilitate local produce.
We're really proud of our relationship with the Manx producers on the island. There's 11 of them that we work with. We stock in excess of 120 lines in most of our stores, and we're really proud of the partnership and the relationship that we've established on what has been a relatively quick journey across 12 months opening, 10 if you include the existing Lake Road store that we had, and the speed at which the Manx suppliers have worked with us to get their products into our stores. So it's been a great all-round story.
And I do have to ask about Andreas Meats, which did announce that it's no longer going to be working alongside Tesco for a number of reasons, things like just not seeing the profits that they were expecting. And, do you have a response to some of the things that they've said?
Yeah, we really enjoyed working with Andreas Meats. We respect their decision to stop supplying Tesco's. And we look, if ever Andreas came back to us and said we'd like to come back to being stocked in Tesco's, we'd be delighted to work with them again.
One of the things they did say was that they weren't able to get many of their products on display, and a lot of them, so they were quite a small selection, shall we say. And is that something that Tesco is going to take on board and look at for the future?
I think we're always looking to learn with our local suppliers. We want to give the best experience in our stores of the range that you would find in a Tesco store added to the local products that we sell. So we work really hard. We've given prominent locations and positions in all our stores. Christmas was a really good example where we worked with Allison's to promote produce in the same way that we promote our own vegetables. So look, we're absolutely committed to doing the best we possibly can and selling Manx wherever possible.
Do you think that before Tesco started expanding here, realised maybe the extent of the responsibility that would be expected of it in terms of its involvement with local producers and local suppliers and really channeling that Manxness that people value so much here?
I think Lake Road gave us a really good indication of just how important to be Manx wherever we could be is to islanders, and we, I feel, have continued that journey across all stores. So yeah, we had a awareness of how proud a nation the Manx are. I'm obviously learning that myself, having come over and really enjoying being here. And it's a beautiful place to be, and got some family connections to the island, and being able to work with local producers and take what we had and make it even better is something that we're absolutely committed to, and I'm really enjoying being a part of.
That's Richard Freer, the area manager for Tesco on the Isle of Man, speaking to Amy Griffiths there. Now, let me know what you think about this next story. An Onchan commissioner wants to introduce a new method for dealing with antisocial behaviour in the village. Scott Wilson says a restorative justice approach, which sees a panel from the community moderating alongside the victim and the offender, could help young people in the long run. Here he is speaking to local democracy reporter Emma Draper.
So restorative justice conferencing, it can be used, or it has been used and continues to be used in small communities. And what happens is it's usually to address things that are sort of low-level transgressions. It's more like children that have done little things that aren't acceptable but don't really warrant a police response. And then when I was in the youth justice team for over 9 years, we used it here initially. So what you do is if you've got a young person, for example, that's committed an offence or a transgression, you bring them and then you get the victim or somebody who's suffered as a consequence of whatever that transgression is, and you bring them together face to face to have a civil conversation about how to address the offending behaviour, put things right, and then sort of bring it as a community event. Like I say, rather than potentially having to get the police involved, which may result in the young person getting a criminal record for something that they've not really thought about, and then later on that affecting them in later life when they go to apply for a job or a college course where they need a DBS check, and because they've got an offence they can't get on that course, all for something they've done which is really, really minor them when they were like 12 years of age, 13 and 14. So basically, in a summary, it just brings the community together. Instead of having the police and the courts involved, you have members of the community who sit there on a panel, so it'll be like 2 or 3 people that are sort of talk during this conference, along with the victim, along with the offender, and it's all sort of resolved quite amicably.
Why is this something you'd like to introduce to Onchan?
I think what it is, and I've seen it and heard it so many times, is the bad press around the young people of Onchan. And my view is, you may call me a bit soft in as much as I don't think there's ever such thing as a bad child. I think there might be a child who goes out, muddies the waters, pushes boundaries a little bit. And I think for something so minor, the community who usually aren't involved in anything that happens, if the police, for example, were involved, they can get involved and actually, get justice for something that's happened to them, a transgression. But similarly, there's so many like-minded people in Onchan that don't want children criminalised, whether they're their own or not.
That's Onchan Commissioner Scott Wilson there. Any thoughts on what Scott had to say there? 166 177.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
It's now 11 minutes past 5. Volunteers progressing the restoration of Queen's Pier in Ramsey say they are here for the long term and won't be deterred by bad weather. Severe storms recently and an unpredictable summer last year means progress has slowed, but the team is hoping to get back on track after successfully erecting scaffolding around another bay. It's hoped Bay 9 and 10 will be completed this year. Project manager Dennis Curfey says the further out to sea they go, the more difficult it becomes.
We're already having to think of other ideas as to how to put the steel on and take it off, because we can't always be on the beach. The tide doesn't go out far enough when we get, once we get out to Bay 18, 19. Yes, it's getting more challenging all the time. Health and safety is our main thing. We must work safely. So, yes, we have to do it as and when we can.
And whereabouts are we up to now? What's the next task on the work list, so to speak?
Well, it's Bay 9 and 10. We're hoping to get our teeth into it this year. Obviously, if weather had been with us, we would have been already ongoing. Steel would have been due any time now if that was the case. But unfortunately, even though we've given the order for Bays 9 and 10, they haven't been able to get their surveyor over yet to give all the correct measurements and what have you, because we have to strip it first, and we can't strip it because the scaffold hasn't been put up. And, and that's weather related, unfortunately. But Bay 9 is scaffolded. We can start stripping that, but Bay 10 is not scaffolded yet. Every bay is not identical. And like the Bay 9 is the first stabilising bay, so it's wider. It's only a 20 foot in length instead of 40 foot, but it's 40 feet wide, whereas the main bays of the pier are 40 foot long and 20 feet wide. Bay 9 is 40 feet wide and 20 feet long. So, yes, it's a totally different arrangement with the steel. It's just a big Meccano set, really, isn't it? So.
And how's the fundraising progressing? Because obviously every bay that you complete means quite a lot of fundraising. And is that all going according to plan?
It is, yes. Our funds, I must admit, are in a very good position at the moment. We had a couple of bequeaths just before Christmas and has helped us an awful lot, which we're eternally grateful for. So yes, we're at the moment and it's trickling in all the time. So which is brilliant. The support we get from the public is unbelievable.
Great to hear from Dennis Curfey there, speaking to Simon Richardson, wishing all the best to the Queen's Pier Restoration Trust. Now, a Castle Rushen High School student has become the first to address the UK Youth Parliament in the House of Commons. 16-year-old Daisy Arnold spoke during a special debate for Crown dependencies and overseas territories hosted by the House of Commons Speaker's Office. Daisy was introduced by Commons Speaker Lindsay Hoyle.
We now come to the youth representative of the Isle of Man.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was born and live on the Isle of Man, which is an internally self-governing Crown dependency. In 2006, the Isle of Man, in line with the ongoing work of the government to engage young people with politics, reduced the age to vote to 16. So it is an honour and a privilege to represent the island today at Youth Parliament. Currently, the population of the Isle of Man is just under 85,000, but it is an ageing population which presents some considerable financial challenges for the island. In December 2022, 22.5% of the population was over 65, with the smallest age groups being 17 to 19 and 20 to 24. A contributing factor to these low numbers is the large number of students who, once they've completed their A-levels, need to leave the island to attend university and gain qualifications they are unable to attain on the island, with many failing to return once qualified. As the Isle of Man is classed as overseas, the tuition costs are more than those who are living in the UK. The Department of Education, Sport and Culture recognise these challenges and have heavily invested in the Isle of Man College, the only further education establishment on the island. Working with Chester University, they have developed the college to university status and have significantly increased the number of courses and qualifications available to Manx students. The destination data for Year 13 leavers shows a continuing trend for school leavers choosing to move straight into the workforce. Many have been successful in securing learn-as-you-earn roles, which is very positive news for the island's economy as we are successfully retaining our young people. The Isle of Man delivered its budget recently, the focus of which was sustainability. If the island is to create a sustainable economic future, it needs to ensure it retains its young people, diversifies the economy, and capitalises on the strengths of the island to attract new, economically active residents. Only when we have a sustainable, economically active population will the island have revenue to support and care for those in true need. Thanks.
Well done to Daisy Arnold, speaking there in the House of Commons chamber earlier this afternoon, doing the island proud.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Well, here's what you need to be aware of on the roads this evening. In Santon, temporary lights on the Newcastle Town Road between Ballyvarton and Mount Murray for resurfacing. In Douglas, temporary lights on Lord Street for the demolition of the old Salvation Army building. In Sulby, temporary lights on the Sulby Strait for sewer repairs. And in Ramsey until the 4th of March, temporary lights on Lazaire Road on the approach to Parliament Square. 24 hours a day for work on the pavements there. Over at the airport, no issues expected with this evening's schedule. Safe travels if you're heading somewhere nice this weekend. And on the sailings, we know there was a little bit of difficulty due to fog at Heysham Port earlier today, but that has had little faring on the Manxman's schedule this afternoon. She departed Lancashire at 2:15 and is due back into Douglas at 6 o'clock. Due back out to Heysham at 7:15 and due to arrive there tonight by 11.
Ask how you can spread the cost interest-free at You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
17 minutes past 5. There's been a lot of talk recently about the island's minimum wage and living wage. Plans to align the rates later this year have been put on hold while a review takes place into how the minimum wage is calculated. The living wage, meanwhile, is currently calculated via the UK's basket of goods approach, with some slight tweaks for the Isle of Man. But why do we do it that way, and why can't we produce our own basket of goods measurement? Today, the Tynwald Select Committee on Poverty heard from Head of Statistics Isle of Man, Dr. Kelvin Corlett.
It's no exaggeration to say that certainly we do not have the capacity to produce baskets on the island, and I'm not entirely sure how reliable or how useful such a process would be relative to the threat of there being differences. Just to explain that a little, it would be a question of if we go out, try and find 60, 70 families to decide upon an adequate basket of goods, what they view as an adequate basket of goods for their household type. Is that likely to be so much more reflective of the entire population as a whole than the UK's method? Is the Isle of Man that culturally distinct that its needs are sufficiently different to merit such an approach? So that would be the greatest challenge in going down that route, would be a question of resource and time, and also questions about how useful the final results would be. How much of a challenge this is, I can't comment now, because it would require a lot more technical review and consideration of this to determine. In essence, with regards to the living wage as it is currently calculated, we've pretty much discussed the sum of the difficulties or the challenges that are experienced.
You're basically saying that the basket of goods that we use from the UK, there's very little difference between, say, the Isle of Man and the UK when you're comparing the basket of goods.
Well, we don't know that because we have no basket of goods for the Isle of Man to compare. But the question that would need to be answered would be, are the differences great enough? And is the accuracy by constructing Isle of Man baskets sufficient enough? They may be, they may not, to justify doing it entirely on the island.
Dr. Kelvin Corlett there, Head of Statistics, Isle of Man. The Isle of Man's preparations for this summer's Island Games in Orkney are moving forward, but it's not been without its challenges so far. That's according to Jill Gillings and Gary Jakeman of the Island Games Association of Man, which is tasked with many of the logistics to get the Manx squad to the Games each time.
It's coming together. Inevitably, there's always problems. Each island has a different set of sort of difficulties that we come across or things that challenge us. And because Orkney is such a small island, they have difficulties particularly to do with sort of accommodation. So yeah, there are challenges, but it's something that is valued by so many people. It's really worth doing the work behind it.
How difficult has the accommodation situation been?
In essence, we knew before we went there that the situation with the accommodation was going to be sort of back to basics. There's the expectation of using sort of schoolrooms as dormitories and having sort of that type of accommodation. Because there's so many people interested, those places went pretty quickly. And I think most of our team are going to be accommodating sort of self-catering, which I don't know exactly yet. It's obviously an enormous task to try and sort of to fit everybody in, and they're working hard at it.
How are those who are planning to go to the Games dealing with these rising prices that we just see in everything all over the world at the moment?
Yes, these games are just about as expensive as Bermuda, which comes as a bit of a shock. These are the first games for me, I think, that we're in school halls, dormitories. We've only ever been in a hotel once. The rest of the time we've been put up in schools, caravans. Still expensive, and this one, even though we're not in hotels, is perhaps one of the most expensive with reference to accommodation.
Once everything does come together, how satisfying is it for someone like yourself to know that hard work pays off and people can start to enjoy the spectacle of it a bit?
I was a sportsman in my youth. It was a very long time ago, but I think myself lucky that every 2 years I get to watch the best talent in the Island Games in all the sports, and I'm so fortunate. Hopefully I'll get to see a lot of sport in Orkney. That's one of the big benefits for me. You know, I'm a sportsman through and through, and to watch youngsters coming through, it's just fabulous.
And this year's Island Games are scheduled to take place from the 12th to the 18th of July. Closer to home, FC Isle of Man are on the road for the final time this season, tomorrow when they visit Burscough in their last away game of the current NWCFL Premier Division campaign. After being held to back-to-back draws in the last 2 weeks, FC Isle of Man manager Paul Jones admits his side needs to be more clinical, but feels they're not too far away from achieving that.
We've created good chances in every game we've played this season. 3 draws out of the last 5 games, I think it is, or something like that. Like earlier on in the season, they're good results to build momentum and to be difficult to beat. Obviously, we're searching for 3 points at the moment, so it's a little bit frustrating when we don't quite get them in games we feel like we've been on top of. But, you know, we've got 2 players on 14 goals, one of which has played a lot of football and the other one hasn't played as much as maybe any of us, including himself, would like to. But, you know, we need players that can score 20 plus goals a season at this level. You know, the top teams in the league have those players, and we believe we have those players in our squad and also on the Isle of Man. You know, the other players who are capable, you know, I'll name some names like Pinney and Charlie and Tom Creer, and, you know, our defenders from set pieces, you know, they all can do more as well. I'm not just saying that because we need them to, because I've seen them do it and I know they can.
Your opponents this weekend, Burscough, I think it's fair to say every game between FC Isle of Man and Burscough seems to be a thriller from the neutral perspective. What makes it such an end-to-end game, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe it's just one of those games against an opposition that, you know, the history kind of is taken into account and players maybe feel a little bit free and there's going to be goals, so let's just go and express ourselves. I don't know. Burscough went 2-0 up at our place earlier on in the season, and we had a good 15-minute spell in the second half where we scored 3 goals and that kind of put the game to bed. So no, I'm not sure. Maybe just both of us like attacking, like trying to get forwards, and sometimes that creates a little bit of space at the back, doesn't it? And on the games we have played against them, both teams have been quite clinical. So hopefully it's a good, entertaining game. You know, we go to try and play front foot attacking football, and hopefully we can do that again on Saturday. But from a manager's point of view, I'll take us scoring, you know, more than 2, but I wouldn't want them to do the same. So hopefully it's a lower scoring game, but us on the good right side of it.
Burscough versus FC Isle of Man gets underway tomorrow at the community ground at 1:30. And with the rest of today's sports news, Darren Timpson.
Good evening. Starting with last night's sports awards. Sir Mark Cavendish and Yasmin Ingham picked up the coveted Sportsman and Sportswoman of the Year. Cavendish capped off an incredible career in 2024 as he picked up the record-breaking 35th Tour de France stage win before retiring later in the year. The Manx Missile was also presented with a Lifetime Achievement Award and honoured those who helped him throughout his career.
I had riders that helped me, and some are here tonight. Andrew Roach is here tonight. Isn't he someone I looked up to when I was young? I had Pete Kenyuk, who when I was pro, he was a younger rider looking up to coming up to that, and he used to train with me when I was already professional. He went on to be Olympic champion, and when you see that, you see the different generations, you know that can just carry on, and to know that you're a little part of that is very nice.
Yasmin Ingham had a successful 2024 herself as she was selected to represent Great Britain at the Paris Olympics. However, Ingham is already looking forward to 2029.
Over the next 3 years, I'll be aiming towards getting my spot at the LA Olympics. And unfortunately, my role in Paris was the alternate combination, which is essentially the substitute. So it was a bittersweet week in Paris. I was incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be there and support my teammates, but ultimately it was tough because I was desperate to compete, and I thought we'd sort of done everything we possibly could done to be selected and compete, but I believe everything happens for a reason.
In sport this weekend, beginning with football, Moran could be relegated from the Canada Life Men's Premier League if they fail to beat St George's on Saturday. At the top end of the table, Pier could increase their gap to 7 points over Corinthians with a win over St Mary's. In rugby, Douglas hosts Bowden in the Regional 2 Northwest, with the Manx side chasing a position high of 5th, and Vagabonds are on the road at Bury. And in hockey, it's semi-final Saturday as all 6 cup competitions enter the penultimate phase.
And that's it for Update Tonight. Ben Cunningham is here next with an hour-long Friday sport preview, and Chris Kinley will be here at 6:30 with Greatest Hits. Thank you for joining us. Hope you have a great evening and a good weekend. Update will be back at the same time on Monday.